देखिए वालेकुम अस्सलाम I thought you give me candy आया So when you play the video,
Yes.
you can put the
Right.
this thing right in the speaker.
Can I connect this? I have a jack.
I think that's the idea. It has to be connected there. If you need more close, you can try.
Get that closer, maybe.
Where is that streaming or only recording?
It's not. I'm just gonna record it, but I'll put. I'll show you my.
I'll take it that.
Look up Abraham Education on YouTube. I might post it on there. Yeah. Okay. Let me just try this out. Make sure this works. Oops. Regardless of whether you're in sixth period. Regardless of whether you're in, here we go. Got it. Go. Okay. Got this. Bismillah. Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. Thank you to all of you for being here. Can I get a small show of hands who was here on Friday when I talked? Okay, so the better part of you. So, Alhamdulillah, yesterday we did the training for educators here in the Columbus area. Had about 34 educators from Hilliard, Westerville, Columbus, Dublin, New Albany Plain, Reynoldsburg, and Cincinnati. And it went very well. So, I talked on Friday, for those of you who don't know, I'm a public school teacher. I work with Minneapolis Public Schools, but I also do educational consultancy, specifically around a program that I created 6 years ago called Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools, that I also wrote into a book a little over 2 years ago. And that was the training that I did yesterday. So, on Friday, I talked about how the climate and the professional expectations in the field of public education make it very ripe for educators to be open-minded about learning about Islam, learning about what Islam means for Muslims, and learning about it in a deep way. And my book and all my programming aims to accomplish that. Bismillah. So, when you begin an educator training or like a professional development session, it's kind of standard practice that you start it by showing research from the field or citing research from the field that demonstrates why the training is needed and why it's a good idea, even though the educators who come kind of already know that. So I was sharing some of those pieces yesterday, and Brother Awesome asked me to share some of those pieces before we get into the parenting skills piece today, to further illustrate the argument for educators to learn about Islam from us, and also to why there's secular purposes, essentially, to assisting us in preserving our kids' Muslim identity when they're in school. Because everything in school has to have a compelling secular purpose, as they call it. So I'm going to go through a few of those pieces, and then I will get into, the session's called Parenting Skills Muslims Need. What does that mean? A big part of my work as an educator in Minneapolis Public Schools especially, but also in my professional development, has been as an instructional coach. I work in the inner city. I helped turn a school around in Minneapolis Public School that had a leadership split. It was actually kind of like a charter school that the district had to absorb because of the leadership split. And when I got hired in there, it was about to fall apart. And I led professional development in that school for 2 years, and it was very successful. And that school now has the highest climate ratings based on surveys from the students and family of any school in Minneapolis Public Schools. It also has the lowest suspension rates and disciplinary referral rates of any high school in Minneapolis Public Schools. A big part of what made that work successful was some of the cultural training that I did for the educators that I do with engaging Muslim students in public schools, because the school is over 90% Muslim students, but also developing teacher skills in behavior management and instruction, and especially skills that involve what you call non-verbal communication.
Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we'll start
How you
Fatiha,
communicate
inshallah.
with kids without using words. So, and I call it parenting skills that Muslims need, or it's really parenting skills that any parent needs, because everyone interacts with kids, whether you're a parent or teacher, and it's really about how you interact with them at a certain level, what they are known to respond to, and how you perform a relationship, how you preserve a relationship with the kid where they have respect for your authority, but they don't have animosity towards you and they will listen to you. So, I can't teach everything that I teach in these sessions today, but I'll show you some classroom clips.
Good job. Good
Negative
job, but
and
not like
like
morning.
examples. And especially we'll deal with how do you deal with kids when they talk back to you. Okay, this is the biggest issue that you deal with in a school or you deal with as a parent. You tell a kid to do something and they talk back to you. Or you're trying to talk to them either in a class setting or an individual setting and they're not listening. They start talking to someone else or they talk back, they check out. What do you do non-verbally with your body language, your facial expression, and your pattern of speech to get them to listen? There is things that you can do that I will show to you. But first, just some things from Ed Research that further justifies educators learning about Islam. And look, my work, like, I really want to, Muslims all over the place, they have so much anxiety about the youth. And most Muslims in the world are young. The average age of a Muslim worldwide is 23. So we have a lot of young people, and there's always this anxiety about the youth. So I try to devote my work to solving these issues. And Friday we discussed kind of a grand vision of the need for the kids to see their parents and the community in general really making an effort to educate the people who control their environments about Islam. Today, after going over a few more things about that, we'll get into the micro level with kids, okay, how you actually interact with them, because both are important. So anyway, there is and this is a book that was published by the American Psychological Association in 2011. And what it is, it's a collection of research studies, mostly longitudinal studies that were done through the 90s and the first decade of the 2000s that studied the children of immigrants. The title of the book is The Immigrant Paradox in Children and Adolescents. Subtitle is Becoming American a Developmental Risk? And this phrase, immigrant paradox, people are familiar with this work, it's like a known conundrum. Now, what these studies that looked at the children of immigrant families that came in the 90s or the first decade of the 2000s found that the more that kids assimilated into American culture, the less success they had in academic and professional outcomes, and the more they were at risk for poor outcomes in physical and mental health. And then for kids who assimilated less into American culture, they found the reverse. The less they assimilated into American culture, the better professional outcomes they had, the better academic success they had, and the less they were at risk for physical and mental health outcomes, such as symptoms of despair and getting into things like drug and alcohol addiction, becoming incarcerated, or things like that. So this whole body of research, it lends strong justification, and it gives a compelling secular purpose to educators to help immigrant families preserve the native culture within their children. And of course, when it comes to Muslim people, that native culture is integral, Islam is integral to that native culture. And that fact you can even prove by showing more studies. Most studies, and a lot of studies in education are qualitative, like they just examine a group of students or something, they write about it, but there is a lot of quantitative studying done through surveying. The largest survey ever done of Muslim students in public schools was done by New York City Public Schools. They surveyed over 2,000 Muslim students in the districts. It found that Muslim students are more likely than non-Muslim students to cite religion as being very important in their lives than by a factor of 3 to 1. And 98% of Muslim students in the survey said religion was important in their lives. So it gives strong justification to creating this link for educators between, if you have it in your professional standards that you have to understand student culture, if you want to understand that for Muslims, learning the religion is integral to that. And you can find that in any, many other areas of academia. The flip side of this, the largest survey ever done of teachers about their knowledge about Muslims and Islam found the majority of respondents lacked even a rudimentary knowledge about Islam or the global reach of Muslim populations. So when I do my training, these are some of the things that I cite for educators to provide the justification for it. Also, too, there's a very old metaphor in education that was created by an academic named Edward T. Hall in 1978. This metaphor that culture is like an iceberg. What's the meaning of the metaphor? Well, an iceberg, of course, looks very big above the surface. You can see a lot of it above the surface, but the vast majority of the iceberg is actually below the surface. And likewise, in culture, you can see a lot of things concretely above the surface. You can see different clothing, taste different food, hear different languages, see different celebrations and whatever. But the vast majority of culture is really moral, mental, psychological things that you can't necessarily grasp so easily with your 5 senses, and it exists beneath the surface. So this, number one, this metaphor is meant to lament the often superficial way that schools will tend to diversity. You know, for a long time, schools have done these cultural days, and that's a different type of thing, you know? But it's been a struggle for a lot of teachers to get to a real level of understanding culture is different than the American culture. But learning about Islam, it gives them the opportunity to grasp many of those things concretely. And I designed my training around doing that. So I just wanted to share those things before getting into the stuff on parenting skills. Okay, can I get someone to raise their hand who has ever found themselves in like kind of an argument with a kid? Just raise your hand lightly. You ever found yourself in an argument with a kid? Okay. Was it a nice experience? Didn't feel very good. It probably felt better for the kid than it felt for you. So, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and I'm not the best at recalling hadith exactly, and I have to translate into English, but he said, he said, whoever leaves off arguing, even when they're in the rights, Allah will build for them a house in the middle of Jannah. And whoever has good character, Allah will build for them a house in the highest station of Jannah, I believe is how the hadith goes. So not getting into arguing is actually part of our religion. Now, kids, there's some things you can do when you get into arguing, okay? And what we're going to do here, now this might feel a little awkward doing this in the musalla a little bit. I apologize for that. I've edited bad language out of these videos. But this is stuff that I do with teachers, to teach teachers how to interact with kids and how to get kids to respect you, obey you, and listen to you. So what we're going to do is watch some negative examples of teachers having bad interactions with kids, and then I'll show some clips of myself teaching my class in Minneapolis, and I'll walk through some things that are the better things to do, and I'll explain the specific strategies that are the right thing to do, and we'll go from there. So, I mean, these videos, these first videos, they're all things where an argument broke out between a teacher and a kid, and then some kid whips out the phone and starts recording it, so that's how you have the footage of it. So the cool thing about all these videos is it's authentic video. It's not any type of staged classroom performance or anything like that. It's all authentic video, okay? So I gotta do this. We'll see how this works.
Frankly, I'm a little sick and tired of what you got to say about this, okay? You showed all this time that you have no clue what's going on here because you got an attitude about this. And this is nonsense.
You're always talking to me.
I've been talking to everybody in here, okay? Yes, I have been. And telling me I don't know how to teach. I've been doing training all over North America. And I know exactly what's going on. Okay, when you sit back here and rip papers up and you don't take notes, you don't read your book, and you do what you do, I know exactly what's going on. I know how to teach, okay? Fine.
Okay, what are you going to say I'm going to play a little? Don't expect me not to say more.
You know, you're the one who can make excuses for yourself. You can be either the excuser, make the excuses, or you can be the excuser. You can say, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm going to win. So you've got your choice to make an excuse or not make an excuse and win. You know, that's the way life, you got to pick and win. I've been down that road before where I've had to either make a choice, where I make a choice. Okay?
Okay. Does this guy seem like he has control of the situation? No. Is he doing much teaching? Okay, so some things about it. First of all, just with body language, what's he doing? What's the big thing he's doing with his body language? He's confrontative, but what specifically is he doing with like his body, his arms? He's doing this, okay? This is something that adults really fall into a lot when they're talking to a kid trying to admonish them. There's a name for this. It's called pheasant posturing or chicken posturing, because it kind of looks like a chicken when he's got the wings out. All right. Now, there's a general rule with body language that the lower your arms are, the more relaxed you look. And the higher your arms are, the more agitated you look. Now, when in earning respect from kids and maintain a sense of authority with them, the number one rule is to be calm. That is the number one rule. There's a saying in amongst behavior management specialists who specialize in this nonverbal communication that calm is strength and upset is weakness. Now, this is something that's hard for people to do because you have to tend to it intentionally. Why do you have to tend to it intentionally? Because kids are annoying. And because kids are annoying, they trigger you. And when they trigger you, it prompts a stress reaction in you. And when you have a stress reaction, you respond in a tense way. And it can be hard not to get perked up. So you see this guy going, he's got the arms all up and all that type of stuff. And the kids start laughing at him. Like, not the kid he's talking to. The kids start laughing to him. And then he's talking to this one young man here. And him and the student next to him, they're like putting their hands on their face because they're getting this kind of tension behind their eyes because the interaction is so awkward. And that laughing that the other kids are doing, kids will do this a lot. It's kind of like a coping mechanism. And then they'll go out of the class, and whatever is going on, they'll start justifying it all as being the problem of this teacher. They'll be like, oh, he's crazy, he's got issues, all this type of stuff. So kids respect people who can demonstrate to them that they have emotional control over themselves, and especially that they have emotional control over themselves specifically when kids test them. And kids are like naturally wired and built to test them. Okay, so that's a body language thing. We'll get into some of the stuff involving the verbal exchange. Let's look at the next thing that we get into here. Okay, this one's a little more fun. This one just kind of keeps going. More and more laughing. Okay, this guy.
Times! I'm asking you to listen! You don't listen! You are a phony tough guy! Phony! Phony! You're a champion! You can get it all day long! Damn it all day! You don't listen to anyone! They're respectfully asking you to put your phone down. You don't. They're respectfully asking you to stop talking. You don't. You just don't stop. You don't stop. I'm trying to get louder. I'm trying to get closer so you hear the instructions. Because you're not hearing the instructions.
You don't need to touch your face with my face. That's the thing. You don't have to get in my bubble. You do not have to get in my bubble. And you spitting on me too. Don't say.
Your toughness is really intimidating now. I'm intimidated. I'm intimidated by that. I'm totally intimidated. No, you're trying to bait me into an altercation.
There's an interesting thing going on here because the student, he's actually calming down a little. Like, he really let out of him. So, that's kind of like an emotional release when you do that. And now the student's actually calming down. But the teacher's going to re-ramp up, and you'll watch the student re-amp himself up after the adult does that.
Because you want to have a lawsuit. That's your toughness. I'm not doing anything except...
Okay, you see what the student did there? Like, he let out this big outburst, then he put his hands down, he's like calming down. The teacher keeps going with it, so the kid, he kind of walks in a little bit of a circle. Why? To amp himself up to get back into the argument. Okay? Just take note of that.
Asking you not to talk and asking you loud now. I do not care. I don't care. Then leave. You're not now go.
Now, notice something here, too. You saw in the other clip, and these are entirely different schools, entirely different classrooms, entirely different kids. When that other teacher was giving all the tense arguing talk to the kids, they started putting out their hands in the face. You see the kid in the yellow ball there? You see how his hands are in his face? Now, when kids are exposed to this interaction all the time, what happens is their sensitivity to it in the beginning, it causes their tear ducts to activate. And it gives them the feeling almost like they want to cry. Sometimes when they're first exposed to this, they might cry. And that doesn't feel good. Now, kids who are exposed to this consistently over time, they don't want to have that feeling. So what they end up doing is they end up desensitizing themselves. And they start developing narratives within their own mind about the adults that allow them to desensitize it to themselves. And then eventually they can go through these interactions and not have that happen. And then eventually they can go through these interactions and they can start pushing back. So the gentleman in the student in the white shirt who's arguing with the teacher, this isn't his first go around. He's been through this before. He's at a different stage. The younger kid in the blue shirt, he's maybe less exposed to this, so it's causing him that tense feeling. It's a funny thing too, they're sitting on these balls, these yoga balls. That's something they do in some classrooms to help keep the kids relaxed. It's not very relaxed.
Okay, that's unnecessary. You're calling me a. You're just calling me a. You're calling me a. Get out of the class. Get out of the class. Leave the room. Go wherever else you want.
Okay, does that guy have control of the situation? Is the kid listening to him? Is he getting anywhere with anything? No. And it's amazing, he's a big, tough, strong guy. He's using his voice with force, using his strength, all that type of thing. It's not getting him anywhere. Okay, just take note of these things for now, and we'll get into what to do instead.
Need for you to put your
There
face
is
on my
no
face.
need for you. I had to be loud.
You had, man, does anybody see
Listen,
a need for
go
that?
outside.
No.
Go.
Many times, and you're not even admitting
This is a different one.
one time.
I can say it.
A
Yes,
man
I
admits
fucking
to something
cried.
and says,
Yes,
yeah.
I did. Multiple
All right.
times I did.
Okay.
But guess what though?
That's all right.
Okay,
That's
but-
all right. Who
but
said
you
anything
talk-
was that? You
talk
talk more than anybody.
Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of cursing in this one, so there's a lot of audio cuts. That's what that is. And sadly, both the teacher and the kid are cursing in this, which is sad and pathetic. And kids do so much cursing in schools these days that a lot of teachers have become desensitized to it. I would say teachers who are from the millennial generation or lower, they might even have a sentiment that's not a big deal or this type of thing. So that is something to talk to your child's teacher about, something that I address in my training, that we need to be more mature with kids and this type of thing. But anyway, pay attention to the argument here.
Talk more than anybody in here. Anybody.
Can I talk?
Anybody.
I let you talk. I let you talk.
You talk more than anybody.
I let you talk. And every time I try to
You
say
talk
a
more
word-
than anybody, too. We let you talk too much because all you do is talk.
Something I want to point out here too, because what I'm going to get into more has to do with your facial expression, how you respond, and what you do with your speaking pattern when you respond. There's a whole system of things you do with your body language when you're trying to tell a kid to do something and you have to direct them and there's a situation you need to address. And one of those things is like having your body square and completely committed to them. So something this teacher is doing with his body language, the kid is here and he's sitting like this having an argument with him. What that signals to the kid is he's just one small motion away from turning away and giving up on the situation. It shows he's not really fully into the situation. And without that show of commitment, what it tells the kid is that he can just if he just keeps pushing a little more, he's going to win and give in.
All I do is talk.
That's all you do is talk.
Come on.
Pretty
what
much.
else you got to say?
Pretty much.
What else you got to
Pretty
say?
much.
So pretty much.
What have you handled in your life? You're still here. You're still here. You're still here.
You're
Still here. Here.
I swear to
There's
God.
just got here 5 days ago who've done more work than you've done in the past 30 days.
That's hilarious. That's
It's true.
In the past 30 days,
True.
really?
Yeah.
Because I recall the last
Yeah.
30 days, me busting my you because I'm trying to get
It's
the
not
fuck outta
for
here.
me, I
You're
told
a-
you. It's for you.
Period, point
You
blank.
could have been
You're
out of
a-
here.
You talk
How am I?
You talk about.
I'm right here talking to you, right to your
face. But you talk behind people's back. You used to talk about Brandon behind his back.
I
You
never
talk-
talked anything
you
on
talk-
Brandon.
you talk
What did I
shit
say about Brandon?
you talk Jordan
Tell me
behind
one
his
thing
back.
what the
When-
You're so full of right now. You sound stupid. Who told you that?
day
Who are you listening
The day
to?
you and Jordan
What's wrong with you?
The day you and Jordan got into it, when he walked out of the
Yeah,
you're like,
I didn't talk. If someone asks me what happens, I'll say what happened. That's not talking.
Okay, so those are all negative examples of what to do when kids talk back to you. And often how it just escalates and gets absolutely nowhere, and relationships between adults and kids get ruined, and the kids a lot of times end up feeling like they have control over adults versus the other way around because of the way that they're getting the adult agitated and all this type of thing. Now, like after showing this, what I normally do with teacher training is I teach the strategy that you do instead when a kid talks back to you. And then you pair teachers up, and one teacher plays the role of the kid, the other plays the role of the teacher. And they first do it the wrong way, where they have an argument just to get a feel how it goes. And then they do it again, and the teacher who knows the correct thing implements the strategy of what you do. I'm not going to make you guys do that, but maybe we'll get to some point where we do that type of thing. But what I did was I've recorded myself doing this with my daughter, where I will play the teacher and she plays the kid. And you'll see us do a non-example first, where we get into an argument, and then we create a context and get into an argument, and then the example of the right thing to do. So just watch, pay attention here, and notice what I do when I do the right thing. Okay, either I'm going to either yelling at her, not bossing her around, okay? 3, 2. Okay. So what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you to not, to stop bossing your sister around. And then you're going to get defensive, you're going to defend yourself, and we're going to argue about it. Okay.
So I'm going to yell at you?
Well, I mean, you're going to come back to me trying to say that either you didn't do it or you had a reason to do it, okay?
Yeah. And you're going to do it because I was yelling at Lena?
Well,
I know how to yell about that.
Okay. Either I'm going to yelling at her, not bossing her around, okay? 3, 2, 1. Nora, stop bossing your sister around!
Well, she was yelling at me!
No, you were yelling at her!
But I had to yell at her because she was
Okay, you know what? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Well, you never listen!
That is not true.
Yes, it is!
No, it's not!
Yes, it is!
No, it's not!
Yes, it is!
Okay, you know what? You're grounded. Anyone ever had an exchange like this with a kid? Ever seen an exchange with a kid like this? Had this? Yeah, it happens. It happens to the best of us sometimes. Okay, before showing the right thing to do, first of all, observe something. You know, if you look at her face here, like she's having a good time with this, you know, and we are acting, but, you know, kids, you know, especially teenagers, they have a developmental need for dopamine release, and you get dopamine release through like new experience, excitement, and thrill. There will always be some kids, especially adolescents, who they develop a thing where arguing with adults becomes like something that they think about and something that they start seeing how good they can do at it, and they start enjoying it. And they don't have enough expanded awareness of environments and enough expanded empathy of others to understand how they're hurting their parents when they do this, and they'll start to really get into it. If you have 3 kids, you're usually going to have one who might have that tendency in them. I have 3 daughters, and this is the one who has that tendency. So sometimes kids actually enjoy this, and you know that's hard to win, whereas me, I'm knocked out, even just playing this. I'm knocked out for the count. I'm winded from this. So now we're going to do it over again, and you'll see the right thing to do here, okay? So pay close attention. Okay, good. Okay, now we're going to try it again. Okay, I'm going to start calmer here, and I'm going to start calmer, and we're going to see how it goes, okay? You don't know what I'm going to do this time. We're going to start calm. 3, 2, 1, 0. Nora, you can't boss your sister around.
Well, she was yelling at me! You're scaring me. You're looking into my eyes.
Okay, what did I do? When she talked back to me, what did I do? Yeah, I didn't say anything. Okay. Now, if you look at all those clips that we watched of the students and the teachers arguing, Okay, this is how arguments between kids and adults go. It always breaks down to some form of, yes, you did, no, I didn't. Or no, you didn't, yes, you did. Or he did it, no, he didn't. It's always just some back and forth like that. You know, the first clip, the kid's like, this class is hard. Teacher, no, it's not. You know, the other, leave. Leave. No, don't you get out, don't get out of my bubble. The other one, you haven't done anything in 30 days. 30 days, the biggest mistake that adults always make when kids talk back to them is they say something, and that gives the kid something to react to. When a kid talks back, they're not coming at it with like a whole big scheme of like logical reasons of why they did what they did and why you're wrong, all this type of stuff. They don't come with some big thing like that. The only thing that gives the argument fuel is the adult saying something to the kid that gives the kid something to react to. Next time you see an adult and a child disputing, just watch, and you'll notice that happening. Now, I didn't say anything. That was part of what I did here. That's a part of it, is not responding. Also, when I gave the directions, I was much calmer, slower with my pace of speech, and lower with my volume. But when I was looking at her like this, okay, I'm holding, this is a specific facial expression. This is a neutral, relaxed facial expression. And how to do this is something that you need to learn. This is a facial expression that is used to demonstrate to young people that you mean business, as they say, or you're serious about the situation, but you're also in complete control of the situation. What constitutes a relaxed face? There is one key thing that constitutes a relaxed face and makes a subtle difference that can distinguish it from a face that looks stressed out or agitated or out of control. And that key is having the teeth clenched, meaning having your teeth stuck together. So if I hold a face like this, it looks much more tense and much less relaxed and much more agitated than holding a face like this. Now, how do you make sure that your teeth don't clench? This can be difficult because clenching your teeth is a stress reaction. And when you walk over to your kid, you tell them, put the iPad down, you need to clean your room, and they're like, just a minute, or like, no, I don't want to, or something like that. It annoys you, and adrenaline spikes in you, and if you don't abort the spiking of adrenaline in you, it causes a physiological response in the person. The teeth clench, you might sweat a little, the muscles tense up, it causes excess acid to release in the stomach if it's really bad. And if you don't abort the process of adrenaline firing in you in these situations, adrenaline takes about 27 minutes, like 30 minutes to run through the body. And a lot of teachers and a lot of parents, they spend all day with kids just running on adrenaline. And when you're running on adrenaline all day, you can do that because the adrenaline will sustain you, and the kids are constantly giving you stress triggers to constantly be feeding the adrenaline. And then what a teacher finds when they go home at the end of the day at 2:30, 3 o'clock, they're just completely flushed. They're completely drained. Oftentimes, the parents, they finally get the kids into bed, or they finally get them out to the activity or whatever, they sit down and they're just completely drained. It's because adrenaline has been running through them the whole time they've been interacting with the kids and trying to control the kids, and it's completely wiping them out. And this is how burnout happens in teaching and parenting, is by not controlling the stress reaction. So when a kid does something that triggers you, especially after you tell them to do something and you need them to listen, what you do, don't say anything. Make sure your teeth do not clench, because that's what triggers everything else. That's the first thing your body does in reaction. How do you do that? You can do that by taking your tongue and sticking it to the roof of your mouth, like pressing it to the roof of your mouth. Just try it. You can't press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and clench your teeth at the same time. You can't. It's very hard, or at least. So like when I first teach teachers about this, we first teach them about that. What you want to start doing when next time your kids bother you or they trigger you or something, train yourself. And this is part of why you do practice with it with teachers as well. Train yourself so that when you get the stress reaction, you stick the tongue to the roof of your mouth, because that will keep the teeth from being clenched. Now, after you do that, the other thing you can do is take a relaxing breath through the nostrils, because your mouth will be closed. Not like a deep breath, not like an overly deep breath. It doesn't have to be like a big inhale and exhale, but just like a relaxing breath, as if you just went from standing up to sitting down. Okay, you know, you stand up and then you sit down, you kind of just naturally have like a relaxing exhale, that type of thing. Just a relaxing breath, and that will relax the muscles in your face. And you don't want to smile, but you also don't want to like crunch your face up at all. You want to be a relaxed, calm, neutral face. And that face signals to the kids that you mean business, you're serious, and you have control over the situation. And when you give a kid a command and they talk back and you just hold that face, what happens is, after a few seconds, it feels like a long time in the moment. But after 5-6 seconds, the kid will turn and do what you told them to do. More often than not, that is the reaction, especially for kids who don't have obstinate defiance built up in them already through negative interactions with adults already. And you saw it just in this play with my daughter. You know, she said the thing. She didn't know what I was going to do. She's looking at me. And then she scrunched up and she kind of turned. And she's like, you're scary, and this type of thing. Like, when you hold that face to kids after telling them something, it starts to put a natural impulse in them to move and to get the face to go away. And that triggers them to comply with whatever directions you do. The most classic way that you use this in teaching is when you have all of your students working on something, you have them working quietly, and then you have the kid who gets off task or whatever, and you walk over to them slowly. You don't want to talk across the room to them. And that's a general rule for parenting also. That's a big mistake parents make. Don't yell across the house or yell across the room to kids, because you're wasting your breath. They won't listen to it, and it stresses you out to do that. And, we won't work on it here, but another thing I work on is how you slowly walk over to kids. But in teaching, you walk over to a kid, you say, Zachy, get back to your work. And Zachy will turn and be like, I was just helping him, or something like that. They'll make some excuse. Or sometimes kids, another thing some kids will do is they'll smile at you. Like some kids, they've learned over time that if I give a cute face to an adult, that's going to get me out of whatever they're telling me to do. But you just hold that face at them, like after a few seconds, we'll go back to working. Okay. Now I'm going to show a clip from my classroom. When I do this, I have like the camera in front of me, so you can't, when I'm teaching, you can't see the students. But a common thing you have to do sometimes as a teacher is tell a student to switch seats if they keep talking while you're teaching to the person next to them, or this type of thing, if it gets excessive. And what you'll see in this clip is me tell a student to move to a different seat. And you can't see the student, but hopefully with the audio, you'll be able to hear the chair move and her put the papers on a different desk, and you'll get a feel for about how long it takes, okay? And when I tell the student to move, I'm a little more agitated than I should be in the video, but because it's like the 6th time that I had to stop when I was teaching because she was talking, and stopping when you're talking, when kids interrupt in different ways, is the next thing we'll work on, okay? And rude, and I relying on these sort of fake acts or these superficial acts. They at least were actually focused on building things in community. Can you move here or there, please? This is at least the 6th time I've had to stop because the two of you are talking. That's disrespectful and rude. And I'm more agitated there than I should be, but sometimes that's what happens. Shouldn't have to do it. Ahlan, move to the seat in front, or this one. Now I've given her the directions to move. Okay, the video is at 2:10. You should hear her move the chair and stuff. We'll pay attention to how many seconds it takes for her to act on it and completely. You hear the chair move right there? Okay, that took 8 seconds of holding the face for her to completely act on it. Now, in the moment, especially when you're teaching in front of 20 students and you're just talking to one, that 8 seconds feels like an eternity. And you don't want, and you want the kids to comply. So when you first try this, you have to hold it for what feels like a while to test how it works.
Thank you.
It took about 20 seconds for her to execute the full compliance of beginning to move and getting to the table or whatever. And, when the kid complies after that, say thank you, make it feel good. Sometimes when you do this, like let's say the kid's on the iPad, you say, hey, put the iPad down and go clean the living room, and they're like, but give me just a minute, I'm almost done, or whatever they say. And then you just give them the look, they'll keep playing, but they'll be looking at you, they'll keep playing, and they won't want you to look at them. And, if they're agitated or something, they might go, fine, and throw the iPad down, get off their bed, and then stomp away. Don't get mad at them in that moment for being that way, because they are complying. Just let that pass. You can condition that type of reaction out of them, but you want to do it later, after they've succeeded in whatever task that you had them do, so it feels good, and then you talk to them later, like, hey, when I tell you to do something, it's not because I don't want you to have fun or whatever, just have that talk with them. That's a whole different lesson to teach, okay? Okay, you get about the face? What do you have to do to hold a neutral, calm face? What do you have to do? What are the key things? Somebody tell me. Not clench your teeth. That is the biggest thing. Very good. What can you do to make sure your teeth don't clench? Press your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Very good. Some teachers find it helpful even to move their tongue back and forth on the roof of their mouth when they're doing that, because it can have somewhat of a therapeutic feel to some people that maybe eases the agitation that they're feeling. After you press the tongue to the roof of the mouth, then what do you do? Then what do you do? No, there's something with your body that you do after the pressing the tongue. Something you do through your nose. You take a breath through your nasal passage. Take a relaxing breath through your nasal passage, because that will help all the muscles in your face relax. And both of those things, they are key to aborting the adrenaline process. And that is key to your physical and mental health. And it is key to not getting burnt out as a parent, as a teacher. And it is key to just having an overall calm disposition with kids, because having an overall calm disposition with kids is what makes them respect you. And being calm with kids does not mean being loose with boundaries. That's not what it means. You have boundaries for kids, you have expectations with kids, you want to stick to those. You want to stick to those firmly. But implementing them in a relaxed way is, number one, what the kids are actually going to respond to. And number two, it's going to be what allows you to do it consistently over time. Now, you will have some times with kids where you're agitated, sometimes where you do get a little bit louder. There might be some times where it is appropriate for a moment to get a little more angry at them or this type of thing. Sometimes there are situations like that come up. But if you don't have an overall calm disposition with kids, then when you are more agitated, they will eventually stop responding to it. Or they will get very clever about developing ways to hide what they do in life that they don't want you to know about. Bismillah. So, when you have an overall calm disposition, if you do ever tense up a little bit, which will happen, or you're a little more agitated, they will be more responsive to it. And then even if you do have to get loud at some times or something like this, you don't have to do it so much. Because especially in that second interaction where the kids are around the yoga balls, I mean, like when a kid is desensitized to those types of interactions, they start pushing back, you just have to do more and more and more, and it builds up forever. Yes, brother. Thank you for raising your hand. Mm-hmm. Okay. First of all, have you had that situation where you did this look at a kid and that after 20 seconds it didn't work? Have you ever had that happen? Okay. So look, I'll give my email at the end of this because what I want first is you to try that and then contact me and then we'll discuss it. Now, there is times where you have to say something to a kid. Okay? And there is ways to talk to kids. When you have to get verbal, there's ways to talk to kids. We won't have time to get too into that today, but you're going to see some examples here in a moment. Excuse me. And it relates somewhat to the thing that we're asking, okay? But the important thing, when people learn this, what people tend to think is like, there's no way it can be that simple. Like I've seen kids, they're so defined, there's no way that it can be that simple. And when I was teaching in Saudi Arabia, when I first learned this tactic, I was teaching some of the most spoiled kids you can ever imagine. And there was this one kid, I remember his name was Badr Dagestani because his parents were from Dagestan originally. And I remember learning this tactic and thinking, this is not going to work on this kid. Whoever wrote this book that teaches this thing, he never knew these kids. This is not going to work. And I was amazed, incredibly. I did that with this kid. When he got out of his seat to talk to some other kid, he was supposed to work on a sheet. I walked over him, said, go do it. I walked over him, said, go back and do your work. He said, make me, back like that. And I just looked at him. He looked at me for a moment. Within 6-7 seconds, he turned around. And I could not believe it because I had so many problems with that kid. That was my second year of teaching. You go through a lot of trials as a teacher. If any of you saw me teach in my first year of teaching and how I interacted with the kids, you would not respect me. But that moment was a very empowering moment in my life because I realized this stuff actually does work. And this facial tactic in particular specifically comes from a book called Tools for Teaching, written by a psychologist from UCLA named Fred Jones. And Fred Jones, he, with the University of California, from the late 60s into the mid-80s, he did ongoing observations at high-needs schools in Los Angeles Unified School District, the schools where they had the biggest behavior problems. And he watched the teachers who were effective with the kids, and he watched the teachers who were ineffective. And where he ended, in studying that, he came to realize that most of it came down to nonverbal communication, and he began studying exactly what the teachers who were effective did. And me, I work in the inner city. I work 4 blocks from, my school is 4 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. And the kids who I work with, they have gone through trauma and had troubles and issues that I will put up against any kids that people are dealing with in their life. And they are responsive to this stuff. They're responsive to this stuff. So give it a try. Give it a try. If it does come time where you have to say something to a kid, it's a bit of a different lesson. But what we're going to look at here, I'm going to show you what to do when you are talking and a kid interjects and he interrupts you. Now, if it's one-on-one and you're talking and a kid interrupts you, it's usually going to be like a direct interruption. They're going to be saying something or blurting, as we call it. If you're teaching or talking to a group of kids, an interruption can be the kid blurting something out or saying something to you. But more often than not, a kid interrupting when you're teaching a class takes the form of them just breaking your expectations of how you want them to be when they're listening. So, actually, to answer some of your question, brother, when you do have to say something to a kid when it comes to listening, you have to tell them how to listen. So, a good teacher, they're going to tell kids how to sit in the chair. Sometimes in elementary school, they'll get to the detail of what you do with your posture and your head and all this type of stuff. And you have to make those small expectations very, very clear. And when you're talking, if a kid breaks one of those expectations, like they're supposed to be looking at you as a teacher, when you do what I'm going to teach you, that counts as an interruption. Okay? And the most common actual interruption that kids do when they're listening to a teacher is they'll be sitting in their desk and they'll turn and talk to someone else. That's the most common interruption that they do. And a big mistake that teachers make is they keep teaching when that happens. So anyway, I'll teach what the tactic is and then I'll show you, okay? So when you're talking to a kid and they interrupt you, first of all, you can't talk over kids. Okay, if they interrupt you and you just talk over it, you're not making progress with anything. If you're actually, let me see right now. If you're teaching and two kids start talking in the classroom or something, they will keep talking so long as you continue to talk and teach while they're talking. Because what your actions are telling them is that you can talk and I can keep teaching. And actually, this happens in lessons in Masajid all the time. The brother will be up here talking and teaching stuff. The kids will be over here. The kids will be over there. They'll start talking and all this type of stuff. And the mu'allim just keeps going. And then maybe eventually some brother who's listening to the lesson goes, shh, quiet down, or this like this. If the teacher just stopped, the kids would take it as a cue to turn and listen. Because when you get interrupted, the first thing that you need to do is cut your sentence off. You need to stop whatever you're saying mid-sentence. And you can call this pausing. When you are talking and you pause in the middle of a sentence without finishing it, it doesn't sound natural, and it acts as a natural nonverbal cue for someone who's not paying attention to pay more attention. See, even like here, when I pause for that moment, it caused this guy to look up. You see that? After you cut the sentence off, you do that same breath to relax your face. And then when you've paused, and this guy, like, he's paying more attention now because I paused, what you have to do then is you have to restart the sentence you got cut off in, and you have to continue it in a lower volume than when you got cut off. So to the people upstairs, what I was saying and what I was modeling, when you get cut off when you're speaking, you pause, you take a breath, and the sentence you got cut off in, you go back to the beginning of that sentence, but you say it in a quieter voice. Because the pausing cues the kid's attention, especially if they're off task. They're talking to their neighbor or they're on their phone or whatever. They know in the back of their minds they're doing something that they're not supposed to be. And the pause attunes their attention. And then when you go back to the start of the sentence, that's going to make sure that they can re-engage their attention to what you're saying, because if you continue from the middle of the sentence, they're going to be lost in what you're saying. And then doing it in a lower volume, it forces them to attune their attention even more, because they have to make an effort to listen a little closer. And it also gives them the sense, too, that whatever off-task behavior you were doing, you're paying attention to it closely, okay? That's the third thing. You restart the sentence in a quieter voice. Okay, now I'm going to show you this working in action. All right? Now this, what this video is, because in my teacher training, my training for teachers, something I do is I show the public school teachers what learning in the mosques looks like a little bit, because they're interested in pedagogy. The learning in mosques forms learner habits in our kids. And their public school teachers, Monday through Friday, they can make decisions on their own, how they do instruction, and it can either build upon the learner habits that our kids have inculcated in them in their cultural spaces, such as the Masajid, or it can either clash against it. So this is a big thing that gives a lot of value to the teachers in my training, that they get a window into this, into how the learning of the Quran goes, and the type of pedagogical methods that are embedded in that, and all this type of stuff, as well as sitting and listening to lectures in the environments of our mosque. But anyway, this Masjid al-Khair in Rochester, Minnesota, which is in southern Minnesota, it's where the Mayo Clinic is, they allowed me to film their weekend school for a Saturday, and now I use this video in my trainings with teachers. Now what's happened here, they've broken out into the groups. Our brother Walid here, who is a world-class translator at the Mayo Clinic in French, English, and Arabic, but he doesn't know how to manage kids, but he's teaching the kids how to, like, the Arabic alphabet in this room. And as I'm setting up my tripod and things, like, they notice I'm recording, I'm not normally there. So the kids are getting all curious about me, and I have to explain to them for a moment, what I'm doing and why I'm there. Now, these kids, number one, they're just young, so they're talkative. They're all Somali kids, and Somali kids are very, very social and very, very talkative, and they're around each other all the time. So mastery of these techniques, a lot of teachers who teach those kids, they never know how to get them to listen effectively. So mastery of these techniques is really important to that, and you'll see that especially how this pausing attunes kids' attention right here, okay? And it's blurred, so the kids' faces aren't in it. Hey guys, anything I use this for, you won't be seen in it, just so you know. I'll edit it to blur your face up. The reason I'm recording you guys is because I'm a teacher. Okay, I teach at schools like they have here in Rochester. I also teach teachers. Okay, now you heard me pause there when I was telling them I teach teachers. That like perked their excitement a little bit. They're like, what? Like some Muslim guy with a beard who's Arab, you teach our teachers at school? What? And then they start getting all excited. So I paused and cut off there. And now because they're going to get a little worked up, I have to use this pausing to get them to attune their attention again. And sometimes when you have a group of kids who are worked up and they start talking to one another, you can intentionally start saying what you're going to say, knowing you're going to get cut off in order to use this pausing cue to attune their attention. So just watch. Don't look back. Now what Brother Walid is doing there, he's on the side, and the pausing gives him the sense that, because what the pausing does is it says to everyone, there's something going on that doesn't allow me to continue. And when you have another adult, or even a more mature kid who wants everyone to be more responsible, what they start doing is they start telling everyone to be quiet, okay? And something that shows with kids is the pausing, it creates a social pressure amongst the kids who aren't paying attention from other kids to start paying attention. But at the same time, Walid, he doesn't actually have to do that. If he knew more as a teacher, it's not actually effective to do all that side stuff because you're just giving the kids more to think about, more to react to, and all this type of stuff. But anyway. I'm doing the pause in there. Now watch in the far corner. There's one of the things I teach. Okay, watch in the far corner. You see the kid in the gray jacket who is not looking at me. You see the kid in the blue jacket who is not looking at me, and you don't see it, but under the front, there's actually a kid who is under the front table right now. And I'm going to do the pausing here, and you're going to see all of them get their attention on me like that. You see that? You see that? Okay? So it works. It works. The thing is, when people try this and when that they struggle with, is you have to just really stick to it. You cannot talk over kids. If you ever continue talking to a kid when they're not paying attention, what your actions are telling them is, if I talk, you don't have to listen. If you pause, what it tells them is, I don't continue until you're listening. And the kids will test it and test it. Especially when you're first doing their first getting used to it, especially if you're a teacher. So you might pause and then have to pause. You might have to do it kind of excessively. But it does condition them to getting used to listening to you over time. And it conditions within them in their relationship with you that this guy is serious or this lady is serious, and when he or she talks, we listen. Look at some other examples here. Teachers about as Muslims. I teach teachers about.
Can you put your foot down, please?
See, the brother's actually interrupting me here. Doesn't realize it. I teach Okay, like these kids are amused. So you hear me going, I teach, like, you know, it works as a pausing cue. And you can see the kid in the gray jacket, the kid in the blue shirt, it's turning their faces towards me. Sometimes when you're at the outset of teaching a group of kids or a relationship with a kid, and they have these habits, you have to do that.
Listen, okay, everybody listen, okay? You ask questions, you're trying to answer you, so listen, okay?
I teach teachers about Muslims, and I also teach them about how Muslims learn outside of the Monday through Friday school. So I'm taking some video of this here to show other teachers that they'll see. You know, there's a... Okay, so here's another, this is a pretty good clip from my classroom, and in this clip, I edited later to put labels on the nonverbal tactics that I'm using when I use them. And you can get a good feel in this video by listening to the audio, how the kids respond to them. And there's some examples of me talking to kids in here too that I can break down for you a little bit. And what's going to happen here, this is at the start of a class. This is a 4th period class of 11th graders. And they have lunch before this class. Kids are always worked up in the class after lunch. It's the hardest period of the day to teach usually. The final period, they'll be asleep if they're in high school, but after lunch is always the hardest period. And this year, they were letting them go to the gym to play basketball when they finish their lunch and stuff. So they're all worked up from playing basketball. And there's going to be a few students who come late because they're trying to extend their basketball playing as long as they can. And I got to deal with the students who walk in late while also keeping the rest of the class from getting perked up and talking so we can start the lesson effectively. You can see every day what you add on it. The expectation is You hear there how there were 2 girls who started giggling about something, and I paused and it died down. The expectation is that you're doing work on that every day. And right there, like I have an intercom that has a speaker over the ceiling. Like, so sometimes to make the quieter voice, I'll turn that off. I had to do that with it. You can do it with this. And that's something if you teach with a microphone, you have to consider to do the quieter voice when you're restarting a sentence. Regardless of whether you're in 6th period. The expectation is that you're doing work on the autobiography. You see, because when kids start to side talk, you know, they want to continue the conversation. So like when you pause, they'll stop. And then what they're telling themselves is, well, when he continues, we're going to go back to it. So sometimes there's this little game that you got to play where you continue, but you got to pause again. And so long as you're consistent with it, they'll respond to it. Now, sometimes it gets to where they try going back 3, 4, or 5 times, and you have to stop and just explain to them what you're doing. You just have to say to them, when you're talking, I can't continue teaching. You have to, I actually have a video of me saying that. You just explain to them what you're doing, and just what it is. And then they know. Every day, regardless of whether you're in 6th period or not. And I try to check. That away, please. Now, late students coming in. So it might not totally come through, but the kid was coming in the room with, and one of his other friends who's not in the class was like chasing him. And he came into the room and he shut the door really loudly. It doesn't come like how loud it felt in person. You don't totally get from the audio, but you hear a student go, La, because he was about to say La ilaha illallah because it's like shocking.
It's funny he's in this class next hour.
Can you talk, please? Okay, so like when something happens in a classroom and you have to pay attention to one kid, and the kid's coming in late, a kid coming in late, you have to let them know that it's an interruption. So you stop the teaching and you wait for them to get set, and he's getting his notebook and like the book we're reading that's at the front of the classroom. Now, when you're talking to one kid who needs to be talked to, when you're teaching to a whole class, or, you get an interruption like that, you still have to tend to the rest of the class and make sure they stay set in learning. So this one kid was trying to make a joke about the kid who was chasing the other kid who came in late by saying he's in my class next period because that student was a 10th grader, but he's in my 9th grade class because he failed English, so like they're making fun of his, his academic status or whatever. But anyway, here I have to turn to address that student because if I just let that go, then they're just going to keep talking to each other. You always have to make sure students are set the way you want them set to learn, and you have to be very, very tight about the expectations. And the easiest thing to do is the moment they start like deviating from it, you stop everything. And you do this nonverbal pausing first that they normally react to it. If you have to say something, you say it you give clear expectations and directions in a calm voice. And after this, I'm going to talk to this student who comes in late eventually, but the rest of the class pretty much stays quiet, except for maybe one or two things I have to pause for. And then a second student will come in late too. Show up on. So I was starting to talk to the first kid who came in late, but I got interrupted by a second kid coming late, so I had to pause. Walaikum assalam. So there I'm reminding myself to relax, so I put feeling tense there, because you do tense up. And even when I watch myself on video, like when I look at my brow, like I'm more tense in my brow than I want to be. And it's a benefit of filming yourself when you're teaching, but I'm preventing the teeth from being clenched. So the second student who came in late, she starts talking quietly to the girl who she's sitting down with. So that's what I'm addressing here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, no, it's fine. Thank you. Okay, like she knew I was going to say something about her showing up late, and she's giving me some excuse or whatever. I maybe didn't need to do the, okay, that's fine or whatever there. I was trying to press the time a little bit. But one thing to say to a kid when they talk back or they try making an excuse, I'll actually show you what to say here when kids make excuses. But you need to have an attitude of, I'm not getting into an argument about this. So like it doesn't even matter what you say. And you don't say that in a tense way, you say that in a relaxed way. And that's kind of what I'm signaling here with the, that's fine. That's fine. More, can you turn so you're facing forward, please? More, can you turn so you're facing forward, please? Can you not talk, please? Thank you. Okay, because the student she was talking to got out of position for learning when she was talking to her. So that's why I'm telling her to turn and face forward. You have to tell kids explicitly how you want them to listen and what you want them to do with their bodies when they're listening. And you have to be very explicit with it. Do you have to be that explicit with 16 and 17-year-olds? Yes, you do. These kids are 16 years old. 100% you do, with 16 and 17-year-olds. I taught elementary school for 6 years. I've taught high school for the last 7 years. One of the things I'm most thankful for in my teaching career is I taught elementary school first. It is really not that different to teach high schoolers than teach in elementary schools. It's just a little bit easier with high schoolers. But the explicitness, all the type of stuff that you do with elementary school kids, you got to do the same thing. I'm back talking to the late student. One time, please. Yeah. Okay, I said something to him, he said, and I'm treating that like it's an interruption, okay, because even that little bit I don't want, because he's supposed to be listening. Number one, show up on time. Don't be later than 11:40. Number two, should you show up late and So another student started like flapping his notebook when I was talking, and I paused to get him to stop doing that. Because kids will do little things like that. They'll tap their pen on the table or something like that, play with paper or whatever. That type of thing happens, you stop. And they take it as a cue to stop doing it. And what I'm still getting to addressing the original problem of him not only coming in late, but it being so loud with the way he slammed the door when he came in late. Sometimes there's a reason why you might show up late. If you show up late, and I remind you to show up on time, I'm not saying there isn't a reason that you showed up late. But I'm saying you still need to show up on time. Should you show up late for some reason? Okay, before I get into directing them here on how to close the door, this is something you say to kids when they do their little excuse making. Okay, they have some responsibility. They have some expectation on you. They will have their reasons of why they don't meet it, and they'll try to give you those reasons. All you say to the kid is, I'm not saying you don't have a reason for why you didn't meet your responsibility. I'm saying you still need to meet your responsibility. And that's it. And you can be more specific about what the responsibility is, showing up late, cleaning your room, whatever. But you don't get into an argument about it. You acknowledge that in their mind, they have some sort of reason that we would call an excuse. You just say, I'm not saying you don't have a reason for not cleaning your room. I'm just saying you still need to have your room clean. That type of thing. Turn the knob on the door slowly so it's quiet. Open the door slowly so that is quiet. Come in. Come in and use soft hands when you're getting your book and your notebook, so that is also quiet, so the class is not disrupted by your being late. Because when you do that, your being late is not just your own issue anymore. Now you've made it an issue for everyone else. And I'm just talking to you. You're not the only one this applies to, okay? Something I'm doing there, so like, those explicit directions, like, open the door, turn the knob slowly, open the door slowly. This kid is 16. 16-year-olds would often need that type of direction. Now, if he were 9 or 10, what you would do is you would make him go back out in the hall. You'd make him come back in, practicing and doing it the right way. You might even show him or have another more responsible student show him how to do it the right way first and all this type of stuff. With littler kids, it makes more sense to have them go to the level of having them act it out the correct way. Younger kids are actually really, really responsive to that. Older kids might feel like it's too childish for them to do that, but you still need to be really explicit with the directions. Okay, then a third kid comes in late, and I'll play this because, okay, I have the whole class set now. Okay, there's 20 kids in. I got the interruptions that flared up. I batted them down with the pausing. I addressed the late kid and the issue that needed to be addressed, and he listened. Now I have so the whole class is set, and I have another kid come in late, who's even later. He comes in, when he's getting his book, he actually knocks another book on the floor, and the whole class has to wait for this kid to get in his chair so we can all start learning together because it's an interruption. But because of everything that I've done now, the whole class waits quietly. They don't start talking to one another. They don't start messing around. They all sit and wait there seriously, waiting for us to get the lesson started. Whoa. Stop. Thank you. A few things with writing. So you know, and I'm enjoying reading the autobiographies very much. Okay, and then despite all those kids being late, despite one kid running into the room and slamming the door with a kid who's not in the class chasing them, and the kids laughing, getting worked up about it, it takes a few minutes of work to put that in to get the class set. But now I have the class lesson going with every single student paying attention. And that third student who walked in late, I might talk to him later. Bismillah. The other thing I wanted to point out when I was talking to the kid who came in late, and I was saying how, kind of explaining to him how coming in like that is a disruption to the learning environment. And a mistake adults make is they don't quite realize the lack of environmental awareness that kids have, and the lack of ability to realize the perspective of others that kids have. So, and a lot of the things we get frustrated over them with is things they're doing that are impacting the overall environment that we realize that impact, but they don't. So part of encouraging their maturity along is pointing those things out to them very explicitly, but when you use these nonverbal strategies and you have an overall calm disposition to do it, that is how you get them in a position where they're not all agitated while they're listening, and you're not all agitated while they're talking, and that allows them to actually receive the information. Okay? So, I have more videos of me teaching this type of stuff. We can either continue, or I can take questions, or we can shut it down here. First of all, let's do the two main things. Okay, we'll go back over the two main strategies. How do you hold a calm, neutral face? What's the key thing you have to do? Please, go ahead. Don't clench your teeth. How do you make sure you don't clench your teeth? What can you do? Press the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Then what do you do? Yeah, not take a deep breath. Take a relaxing breath through the nostrils. I say don't take a deep breath because a deep breath people think of as going, and it's not like that. And there is like somewhat of a science to how your breathing affects your heart rhythm. But you want to take just like a relaxing breath as if you're doing something calm, like going from standing to sitting, because that will keep your heart rate at a normal pace. And that's the big thing you don't want to happen. You don't want your heart rate to increase, because that will stress you out and it will trigger the adrenaline. And drinking coffee all day can make it harder to do that. And I drink coffee all day too, so I know well, and teachers do that. But that is something that traps you. I'm not saying to quit coffee, but you might have to be extra aware of it if you're depending on caffeine to run through the day. Okay, very good. When a kid interrupts you, or they break from the expectations of listening when you're talking to them and you're teaching, what do you do when a kid interrupts you? Yes? Huh? You pause, very good. Okay, you pause or you cut yourself off, in the middle of the sentence especially. After you pause, what do? Take a relaxing breath, and then what? You restart how? In a quieter voice, where do you restart from as far as what you were saying? From the beginning of the sentence. I promise you, every single one of those details matters. Every single one of those details matters. And every single one of those details has a purpose. So these are very, very subtle things, but they're actually really, really powerful, strong things to developing relationships with kids where you have a respect of authority with them, and they will accept guidance from you. And and I call it parenting skills Muslims need especially, because actually what's fairly frequent in school systems, but also with parenting, is people are either caught up in being in using punitive measures or reward measures to get kids to fall into line with the behavior that they want. Like they want some system of threats and discipline to be the thing that's going to make the kid not interrupt in class, and it's going to make the kid be still in class, and all this type of stuff. And people who they start liking, the discipline approach seems too mean,
we don't want to be doing that. That stresses us out. Then they go to the opposite extreme and they say, well, we're going to give the kids rewards. So if the whole class pays attention for 30 minutes each day, then we're going to have a party on Friday, or we're going to give you reward tickets, or this type of thing. Candies, treats, whatever, all this type of stuff. You have to have consequences in place for kids for certain things when they get out of line. But dependence on either one of those things to get compliance from kids, it doesn't condition them to respect you or listen to you or take guidance from you. It just conditions them to not have internal motivation for anything. And what do you do instead? You have to have these relationships and use these tactics where they're going to respect you. And, for Muslims, we have boundaries with kids. We have a certain path we want kids to be on. So some child educational theorists and child development theorists in the West, they take the position of you should just let the child be who they are and develop naturally and all this type of stuff, and they take it to a bit of an extreme. There's an extent to which you want to do that, but we need the ability as Muslims to keep kids in boundaries in a way that they're not going to look for their emotional satisfaction and look for their guidance from somewhere else. So that's why I call this parenting skills Muslims need. It's what actually works. It's not as expensive, both in terms of money and time and energy, as using a punitive or a reward approach. I will put up also this whole course. I have a whole course for parents on my YouTube channel. If you look up Abraham Education on YouTube, you go to the playlists. I live streamed every Saturday morning last summer. There's 11 lessons in there. Have a lot more than this. If you want to learn this stuff, it's everything I've learned in teaching about how you interact with kids effectively to get them on board, and I promise you it works. Okay? So I'll only take questions from there. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, the thing is, practicing what I'm showing you. Okay, these tactics that I'm showing you, this is the answer to your question. But you have to really stick to it with a kid and with a class. And the more you stick to it, the more they get conditioned to, when I talk, the teacher stops or the parent stops talking and I have to listen. If you have to take it to a further level where they just keep doing it, then you explain to them what they're doing. I will. I have a video here where I do that with a student that I'll show.
Well, said.
Consecutively, again, turning to the girl next to her to talk. Okay. Okay, there I got it. Wait, sorry. I'll go back. I want to show both interruptions. And remember, you're going to work on it for a long time. Sorry, just be patient with that.
I really ended up with little idea of what the book said.
There was one interruption where she turned and was talking to her. And she's going to go back to it really quickly. And this was like the 4th or 5th time it was happening, so I had to address it verbally. So I come to the Norfolk. You cannot turn and talk to her while I'm talking and teaching. You have to be paying attention and listening. I can't continue if there's a student who's doing that. So when you do that, I have to stop. Okay, like it's honestly as simple as that. You explain to them what it is. That if you turn and talk, I can't continue. And you just make the directions and the expectations very, very explicit. But whatever directions and expectations you set, you have to stick to them. Because you have to show with your actions that you mean what you say. If you say something with your words, but your actions, for all intents and purposes, communicate something else, it's the actions that are the real communication that the kid absorbs. And the hardest thing that teachers have with this is just sticking to it in the beginning of practicing these tactics. Please, don't do that anymore. Okay, I understand you came a little more recently, but I've been through this with all these students. And subtly you can kind of hear me. Like I start getting a little agitated, and then I try to quiet my voice. Okay, like when you sense yourself getting agitated, it's always good to try to relax yourself. Because the more relaxed you are when you're talking, the more relaxed the kid will be. They feed off your energy. The more relaxed everyone is, the better they actually intake whatever you're trying to tell them. Please. We're on page 175. Look at the book. Okay? And again, just being really explicit with directions and expectations. Like she doesn't have the book open. You tell her the exact page she's got to be on to get on task. Okay? If you go to my YouTube channel and you go to the playlists, this thing back here. Whoops. Why does Malcolm say made blacks and green? It was not written last week. It was written. Okay, sorry. This thing's getting all messed up. If you go to my go to Abraham Education on YouTube, you go to the playlists. I believe I think it's part 7, the playlist Parenting Skills Muslims Need. Part 7 is a lesson on how to get kids to do chores around the house. And what I go over there is showing like just how explicit and minute with detail you need to be with kids, especially when you're trying to teach them something new. Because the adult brain integrates so many different things way faster than kids do. So a big thing that you need to practice and get good at with kids is breaking things down in as small steps as possible. Okay? Think about reading the Quran and learning how to read Arabic and the books that are gone through that teach us how to read Arabic and how it just starts from the littlest bit that you practice and builds up. It's a really good example of how learning, effective teaching and learning needs to be sequenced. Any other questions? I hope everyone's having as much fun as I am. Well, like getting them to respond to it is a conditioning process. So, like the first 2 weeks of the school year, I'm doing it a lot more than I am later, and eventually, you know, like the kids, they just get used to like if we're in Mr. Abrams' class and he's talking and we turn to talk, he's going to stop. So by December, I have everyone listening. And actually, when I was recording these clips, I spent like 2 weeks recording some classes. Most of the issues are with a single student who was new to the class that week. So she hadn't gone through that conditioning process in the first 2 weeks of September. So it's about conditioning how the kids respond to you. That's what it's about. But again, like you have to be firm with your expectations, which means like abiding by the principles that we're talking about. Like the biggest like when I teach this to teachers and then I observe them doing this, the biggest mistake they make, like they'll be talking and the first cue to pause is when you see a kid do this, when they just start to turn to talk to their neighbor. The biggest mistake that teachers will make is they will be teaching, the kid will turn, they will talk, and they'll talk a little louder, and then the teacher will pause. Do you get what I'm saying? And then what I have to coach them on afterwards is there was 10, 12, 15 seconds in there. Like you should have paused right from the moment that student turned their head. That's how you keep it easy to do. That's how you keep it simple. That's how you keep them being responsive. Because if you pause when they've turned and talked and let their volume get a little louder, what you're telling them is, you can turn and talk in the class and let your volume get a little loud. That's what you're telling them. If you pause right when they're turn their head, you're telling them, you can't even turn your head when I'm talking, you have to listen. Like whatever, your actions will dictate the actual expectations of whatever you're doing. And effectiveness just comes from consistency too. Like you just have to be consistent. Because each time you break from your expectations, you've taken a step back in conditioning the way they respond to you. That make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes. You have siblings? Well, look, when two kids are fighting, there's a whole other thing. Watch the first video of my parenting course, because what I teach in there is how you approach kids, which still involves being calm, relaxed with your body language, and walking slower than is natural. And what I actually show in that video, I'll see if I can find the video here. Okay. Let me see if I can find this. What the heck? No. I'm not sure if I have the video. What's the Wi-Fi here? Is there our newer guest? Okay, just give me a moment. I'm going to try to show something. All right. Look, approaching calm is really important. Okay, like that's a whole other mistake parents make is when something tense is going on, they get all huffy and puffy when they stomp over there and this type of thing, and that just agitates the kids up more. And when kids are all worked up, they're looking for a relaxing presence to calm the situation down. Yeah, I'm on it. I'm pressing connect here. It's just giving me this. And maybe I'm on it, though, already. So let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. I'll go to YouTube. Anything inappropriate to come up in the masjid. So just give me a moment. I mean, there's a video of this brother. I'm not connected. I don't know. This isn't working. If you look up, well, watch just watch the first video on just watch the first video on that playlist. And a video I break down there was this brother in New Jersey. His name is Ali Ibn Miller. He kind of became famous because kids recorded a video of him breaking up a fight between two 14-year-old boys on the street. And, he talks to them or whatever, and then he became a mentor to those kids, like LeBron James retweeted the video, went viral. He was on these TV shows. Look up the brother, Ali Ibn Miller. And I break down what he does in the first video there, and something that everyone missed from it is when he approaches those kids, he walks up to them like he's taking a stroll in the park. And what you see the kids do, they're all postured like they're about to fight because they've been punching each other. And once they notice the corner of the eye of him coming and walking calmly like that, they stand up straight and they relax, they put their arms down. It completely affects their entire tone. So, when you talk to siblings, there's a way to talk to them. I do get into that in my parenting course as well. But, just this overall tone of being relaxed, the kids having a more tense situation doesn't make that not apply. It actually makes it apply even more. So you just need to walk in and be calm, and they'll notice your presence. You might need to say something loud to get their attention, and then when you start getting a little bit of their attention, then you talk and you do the pausing if you need to attune their attention in a calm way. It's a process like that. Yes? Yeah. Right. Right. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So in part 5 of my parenting course, that is titled "Getting Kids to Talk to You," and in that video, I go over really breaking down how a child's mind works. And what you have to understand is, you know, the mind develops on a continuum of ability to grasp things that are concrete versus abstract, okay, and also to integrate things. And it's like a classic problem people have, like at the dinner table, you ask the kid, "What'd you do at school today?" And the kid says, "Nothing," you know, or just something like that you can't get the kid to talk about it. The whole problem with that question is it's too abstract a question, and it's asking the kids to integrate too much in their mind when you just ask it generally. "What did you do at school today?" Well, they had 4, 5, 6, 7 classes. What class do they think about first to answer that question? Within each one of those classes, a ton of different things happened. They had however many interactions with the teacher, however many peer interactions, which are maybe more preeminent in their mind. So it's all just too much for them to integrate in the moment, so they just give a simple answer and they shut down from it. So you need to start with simple questions that are more concrete, that are easier for them to answer, and you can always start with questions. You can begin with yes or no questions, because those are always easier to answer. And then from there, you can move on to questions where it's maybe not yes or no, but you give them 1 or 2 choices to answer this type of thing. So for a kid, it's like, you know, so when you started class in the morning today, did your class read a book, or did you have morning meeting, which is a common thing they do in elementary schools? Oh, we had morning meeting. Oh, so, you know, did you share with other kids, or did you listen to other kids share, this type of stuff, you know? Or if the teacher read the book, did you listen to the book while you were sitting down, or while you were while you're sitting at your desk, or were you sitting on the floor? Stuff like that. You give them 2 choices, and that also starts to like bring them mentally back into the situation, you know, and then they can start remembering things. So watch part 5 there, because that's when I get into that. And I have to work with that a lot because I teach ESL kids. I teach kids to speak English as a second language, and I coordinate in that position in my school. And kids learning a second language, they often have the same exact tendency, because it can become very high risk for them to give output with their answers. The other thing, I'd like to comment on what you said about being raised by immigrants, and I talk a little bit this in the first video on my parenting course. My whole theory with old world cultures, and for kids growing up here and parenting, and immigrant parents parenting their kids, you know, in old world cultures, when it's more enclosed, and it's not so diverse as far as the values and expectations of young people like American culture is, and things are not so individualized, you basically can be more reactive in your parenting, because everyone is going to be reinforcing the same thing upon the kid. So like you can react to them that something is wrong, and you can give them a mean look, don't do that. And then everyone else is going to do the same thing if they do that in every other context. So they're just going to get the lesson then. Well, there's no escape from this. And if I'm to get by, succeed, and whatever, make people happy, I have to do that because everyone's reinforcing the same thing. Whereas here, they're exposed to so many different things and so many different social interactions, especially when they go to school, and even from adults, so many different types of expectations and reactions that type of reactionary admonishment that immigrant parents tend to give, you know, the kid, it appears as being something more strange to the kid. So then they start telling themselves, mom and dad are crazy, or they got something wrong, or something like that, you know? And on the parents' side, you know, I know the whole thing about getting whooped, you know, like, that comes after a whole lot of buildup, okay? So like at first you give the mean face, but then the kid gets used to the mean face and it stops working, so then you have to speak loud. And they get used to you speaking loud, so then you have to yell. And then they get used to you yelling, so you have to yell even more. And then they get used to you yelling even more, so you have to yell even more. And now you're so stressed out from yelling, you need a stress release, so then you start hitting the kid. And that's what hitting kids normally does. It normally gives the parent a stress release more than anything. And then eventually the kid gets used to just being hit, and they don't even care about that. So then you got to hit them even harder, and it just keeps building up like that. I don't think when you're in a society where everyone is more on the same page, it always has to get built up like that so much. I could be wrong, but because you're in a diverse society where the kids can go other places for new ideas and different emotional needs, you can't do that. You have to develop a relationship where they are going to respect your authority, and you're going to come off to them as someone who's worthy of being followed. And they're not going to get that from someone who doesn't seem like they can control their own emotions and their own physical being when they're tested by kids. So that's why this stuff is so important. Wayacom. Any other questions? Yes. No. No, it's not. No. I do think I have a part in my parenting course about turning around damaged relationships. Which, oftentimes, too, damaged relationships with kids comes around like the time they're maybe like 18, 19, 20. Like a lot of times what kids go through is they have this animosity building up towards their parents. A lot of times beginning from like age 10 to 14. 10 to 14-year-olds are very, very moody. So they have these mood reactions that make parents really upset, and that's a lot of times where these upsetness patterns begin. And then, that causes the child to kind of withdraw inside themselves from a connection with their parents. Their peer relationships will become really important to them at that time because they might start feeling more emotional validation and satisfaction from that. And all the while, too, they have this animosity building up towards their parents. As their mind is getting more advanced, they start calculating how to articulate their grievances towards their parents that they've actually had for a long time. And then by the time they're 18, 19, 20, all of a sudden they know how to articulate that grievance, and they'll come out to the parent with saying something about them that's like really hurtful. But for the kid, it's like almost like empowering and something they've held on to for a long time but not known how to articulate. So, effective communication becomes really important when those types of things happen. What I always recommend to people is whatever you want to say to your kid, write a letter to them. Or a kid or anyone you have like a broken relationship with or a damaged relationship to some degree. Write a letter to them and read what you wrote to them and then redraft it and try, writing can be a way you get in touch with your emotions, and when you can draft it, you can craft what you want to say, in a productive manner. And usually it's going to involve, expressing some remorse and some appreciation, maybe some valid frustration, all that type of stuff. But when you articulate it in writing, it can all come out in a more productive way, and then you give it to them to read. And I recommend trying to do it on paper, not digital. You give it to them to read, they sit down and read, they're in a more relaxed way when they read it. I think that's an important step to trying to mend broken fences personally. That's what I recommend. Excuse me. Any other questions? There's also something, too, as far as when you're trying to get the kids to respond to questions that they call wait time in teaching. And like the average wait time that teachers will wait for an answer to a question is like 1 second or even less than a second. Because like after 1 second, a teacher asks a question, they start feeling like no one's getting it. But the average kid, they actually usually need like 3 seconds of time to formulate a response to most questions. If you're using higher level academic language or more abstract language with what you're talking about, or if the kid themselves is operating in a second language, it can be more like 6-7 seconds. So that's a whole other thing I get into in that one video. Like I'll
sometimes a mistake that people make when they're trying to get answers from someone or responses from kids is they just don't wait long enough because their mind takes longer to formulate things. Any other questions? Well, I mean, I mostly have done them in Minnesota, and I do my training for just in engaging Muslim students in public schools more extensively, and this stuff has a place in it, but I more like have video resources that I refer people to with this. I'm looking to expand it, because a lot of teachers themselves, they need these skills for dealing with kids and things too. And you know, our kids go through a lot. Muslim kids go through a lot in school, because like they get treated, like the way that they get treated in the mosque and home and school can all be very different from one another. And even just the very structure of the mosque, you know, like when we're giving talks in the mosque, there's more room for a kid to move around and get up and stand up and roll around on the ground or this type of thing, because it's floor seating. Well, when you go to a school then and you're seated in a desk, you might have a bit of a conditioned habit that if I'm listening to a teacher talk, I can move around a little bit, it's no big deal. But when you're doing it in that context, like it just doesn't work in this type of thing. So like those teachers need to really work those habits to condition our kids to listen well in school quite a bit. So, you know, I've done workshops here in Minnesota and Seattle in person, but I do a lot of them online since COVID and this type of thing. But I'm available to do anything wherever. And, you know, if you know public school teachers, my main course is
Assalamualaikum.
guys, you can go, if you would.
Yeah, you can go out. Everybody can listen to me.
QR code.
You can go outside, eat there, but please clean up.
In touch with what I'm doing.
Okay, I want everybody, when finish your food, you have to clean up. If I found someone did not clean up, then they will be completely cannot go out in the future.
That's my website
for
public school teachers. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
There next to the bathroom, there usually is a group of like teenage boys in there, and they're usually like fighting or...
The principle, honestly, is pretty much true for all ages. And my parenting course on YouTube, I've had lots of people get in touch with me who've watched it from around the world. A lot of people are like using these things on their spouses and this type of thing. Like it honestly works for a lot of different interpersonal relationships. You know, like, so there's some different things with younger kids. If you have a specific question, email me. My wife is actually a preschool, early childhood teacher, so sometimes when I get questions about that age, I more ask them. But you know, believe me, like, you know, the idea of like slowly approaching and all this type of stuff, you know, from age 2, even a little younger of 2, kids can like, they'll start understanding what you're saying and this type of thing. So all these talking patterns, you know, it's always the sooner the better to practice them, I would say. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, it's been an absolute pleasure for me to visit this community. It's a pretty amazing thing that you got here. I ask Allah to bless all of you. I love all of you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything good that I said comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His blessings upon us. Anything wrong that was said comes from the deficiencies within myself and my own soul. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah alone, and I seek repentance from Him.